What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and I've done about 95 drafts, I think, just post-draft. We talk pre-draft, we're talking like big boards. We have probably 200 plus at that point. But for post-draft 2023 NFL season best ball, I am 95 drafts in, and I want to share with you guys the players that I can't stop drafting. So today, we're going to talk through the 3 wide receivers that I cannot stop drafting on Underdog Best Ball. Now, before we get into that, if you are new here, if you are new to Underdog Fantasy, make sure you check it out. Use promo code RON. They will match your deposit up to $100 on Underdog Fantasy. I have a link in the description, a link at the top of the comments below. You click it, it takes you to Underdog Fantasy. They'll use my promo code. You'll get your deposit matched up to $100, and you can go play Best Ball, draft in these leagues. It is so nice that it's like June 27th, and we can draft meaningful best ball teams right now. They have I think it's a $4 Superflex tournament out right now, the Pomeranian, but Superflex, not the Pomeranian. What the heck is that thing called? Oh, the Chihuahua, but Superflex. $4 to enter, I believe. Really cool contests that are made for beginners. So if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, it's best ball. You don't have to make trades. You don't have to set waiver wire. They set the best lineup every single week for you, and you can get in at a very low price point of $4. You can see what the ADP looks like. It's real money on the line, so the ADP is much sharper than, say, ESPN or Yahoo. And just from getting practice in those on Underdog, it'll have you prepared for your redraft leagues where, say, Chris Olave is going the second round on Underdog, and your home league is probably more of a fifth round guy. So you look up, you're like, oh, Chris Olave is here in the fourth round, fifth round. Absolute steal here. It gets you really, really nice in a good spot so that, you can just run through a bunch of practice drafts and be good to go to dominate your home league. So again, promo code RON. With all that being said, if you enjoy, make sure you're down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go. Now, earlier this week, we made a video on Quentin Johnston. I think this was over the weekend. We made a video on Quentin Johnston as my most drafted wide receiver. Now, if we look past Quentin Johnston, my second most drafted wide receiver, for the first time ever that I've been in on this guy, is Mike Evans. He's always been a fade for me, but you can see he's going at the wide receiver 35 in the 6th round right now on Underdog, which just feels a little bit crazy. For me, I've done one set of redraft rankings so far. In my first update, he was my wide receiver 28 as a 5th rounder. So probably a round higher than consensus, 7 wide receiver spots higher. And just because this is a guy who just over his entire career has never been priced this low. We're talking wide receiver 35 as a price tag right now. And if we look through, right, we have his, this is a table of Mike Evans' fantasy career since 2014. I only have ADP dating back to 2017. But he is the wide receiver 35 at ADP right now, and since 2017 has never been drafted outside of the top 15 wide receivers. So we're getting a 20-spot discount on Mike Evans. He's had terrible quarterback play too. I know this year he has Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. Of course, he's had Brady, and Winston and Fitzpatrick have been great because they're such high-volume passers. But as a rookie, now, of course, Mike Evans was much better as a player as a rookie. But he had Josh McCown and Mike Glennon and still squeezed out a top 15 point per game finish. I just feel like we have a lot of breathing room at ADP of 35. Again, since his entire career, he's never been outside the top 15 wide receivers in ADP, probably since he was a rookie. And then his point per game finish, the lowest he's ever had is 25. Wide receiver 25 in points per game in 2015, his second year in the league. And at wide receiver 35, it just feels like we have a lot of breathing room. Now, again, I understand this is the worst quarterback he's had since his rookie year, and the price is definitely valid, right? It just feels like it's priced in, right? That's a lot of breathing room here, wide receiver 35, because of Baker Mayfield and what he does to this offense. Now, when we look at Baker Mayfield and his history, it's a little bit tough with Baker. Early on in his career, he was actually pretty good, right? When we look at these Cleveland offenses that were pretty low volume, I have this table here, Baker Mayfield, every fantasy wide receiver that's been relevant fantasy wide receiver that he's supported over the years, and his deep throw PFF grade and his big time throw to turnover-worthy play ratio on those deep throws, because that's kind of where Mike Evans lives, right? Those huge bombs, 20-plus yards, where he just gets 3 of them and gives you 40-plus points in a week. That's vintage Mike Evans. Now, with Baker, recently it's been rough, right? Carolina with DJ Moore last year, absolutely brutal. 62.1 deep throw PFF grade. DJ Moore was the wide receiver 53 in points per game through the first 5 weeks that Baker Mayfield was in Carolina. But before that, it's not terrible, right? 2018, his rookie year, Jarvis Landry was wide receiver 25 in points per game. The following year, he actually supported 2 top 36 wide receivers in Jarvis and Odell, which is feels like something he can do with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin this year. 2020, I mean, Jarvis was like the wide receiver 37, not great, but still, that would just be like 2 wide receiver spots off of Mike Evans this year. 2021, Jarvis Landry, wide receiver 34. I believe at this point, Evans is probably a better wide receiver than Jarvis. He can be a little bit more efficient just because of his high ADOT and touchdowns. And I think that there's some untapped upside with Baker where, you know, he had a pretty tough shoulder injury that he's worked through since like 2021. And just hoping that he can be fresh and get back to some of that early career magic because he was elite in terms of throws of 20-plus yards. Like we're talking as a rookie, 96.4 PFF grade, 90-plus PFF grade, 2019 and 2020. We're talking 26 big-time throws to 3 turnover-worthy plays, 25 to 10, 25 to 9. Just absolutely insane. Now, I will say I think that 2019 should just be both 25 to 10, but still like 20-plus big-time throws of 20 or more yards is pretty wild stuff. So if he can, you know, I'm not saying he's going to, but I think it's in his upside case for Baker Mayfield or for Mike Evans in general is that Baker can be a little bit better than we think he might be. Like he was a good prospect, first overall pick, hasn't really been good since 2020 through 2018, but he's still a younger quarterback. Like a bounce back wouldn't be the craziest thing in the entire world. And again, he made his bread and butter early on in his career with those deep passes. If he does sort of bounce back in any way, I think Evans as that big downfield target would be the main beneficiary. Now, even if you think Baker Mayfield is going to be garbage, that's fine. Let's give you 2 more reasons to buy in here, which the first of which is Mike Clay's projections have Mike Evans at the wide receiver 20. Again, his ADP is wide receiver 35, and that's on the back of this being a team that Mike Clay has projected to be like pretty awful. I think he has him as like the 27th best team in the league, like a bottom 5 team. He has him as like the 30th ranked offense, and even still, he has him at the 11th most pass attempts. He has Kyle Trask starting 7 games, and even with Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield like playing 10 games and 7 games and both being pretty brutal, Mike Evans still ends up at wide receiver 20 on just 5 touchdowns. So it's really tough where this offense is going to be bad, but it's also going to be pretty consolidated when it comes to the passing game, right? Where like after Mike Evans and Godwin, we're talking about like Gage and Rashod White and Cade Otton, like none of which are true number 3 targets on an NFL team. Like I guess Gage is the most number 3 target worthy guy there, but it's a pretty huge drop off. You have to assume that with Baker, like I think that Brady is somebody that has spread the ball out in his career where like, I mean, you talk about the Patriots, you've had a bunch of guys that he's thrown passes to, whether it's like Danny Amendola or, of course, you have Julian Edelman, and you have like even you have like Deion Branch at the end of his career. You have like I think Kenbrell Tompkins might be one. Like you have a really weird list of guys that he's thrown passes to. I think with Baker and or Trask, it becomes a little bit more consolidated. So even if the offense is awful and the efficiency isn't there, the volume should be there, and that should almost be enough just based on their career averages to get to like, you know, flirt with top 24 numbers. Again, this is like a pretty doomsday scenario here where Baker is not good, 12 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and Kyle Trask ends up coming in. And even still, he has Evans and Godwin both finishing in the top 24. Now, even if you're like, well, projections, who cares at all? Mike Evans, to me, and Mike Evans in those projections has a 22% target share. So that's the biggest thing right now. He hasn't had over a 20% target share in the last 3 years, Mike Evans, but I do believe now with like no more Julio, no more Antonio Brown, no more Tom Brady, I do think things are going to consolidate a little bit more for Evans, and I would expect somewhere in like the 20 to like 22% target share range, 23% target share range, and that can get him to flirt with the top 24 wide receivers. So again, like wide receiver 35, like there's a lot of breathing room there. And the cherry on top with Evans is like last year he wasn't a good pick at ADP, right? He was like a 2nd round pick. He ends up, I think, as like the wide receiver 14, wide receiver 15. He wasn't great. He was fine. But he bailed everybody out last year by putting up like a 48.7 point bomb in the fantasy championship. So he has this out where, let's say wide receiver 35 is true, and he's not going to be good, and he's just going to be a wide receiver 3 this year. He at least has the trump card of when it matters most, or if you know, you're drafting him like the 6th round, right? So he might not even start in your starting lineup. A lot of the time, like you're drafting him as like a flex option, right? But he has that like magic ceiling where if you put him in, he can win you the week single-handedly. Like he is one of 4 wide receivers over the last 3 years with 2 or more 40-plus PPR point games. It's Evans, Diggs, Adams, and Hill. And you can see like only Chase, Waddle, Higgins, Metcalf, Lockett, Claypool have 1 each. Justin Jefferson has never had a 40-plus fantasy point game. So that's kind of Mike Evans' calling card with his touchdown upside, his ADOT upside, that he can be awful all year and then come up huge and win you a week. So I think that someone that, like, you know, you're drafting as a flex option, that's a nice out to have, where even if all goes wrong, he can still make an impact if you put him in your lineup in the right situations. Now, after that, we have my fourth highest drafted wide receiver at this point. My third highest, I believe, is Nico Collins, but I've talked so much about Nico Collins, I decided, like, let's just chill on that. And let's talk about Rashod Bateman this year. Now, of course, I'll start with Bateman. He's the wide receiver 45. He's going in the 8th round, which feels really low for him, but it's because of the injury concerns, and I figured we'll do kind of, I guess, like a Slim Shady. We'll talk about the downside first with Bateman, and of course, it's the injury, right? When we talk about Bateman, like, it's pretty brutal. We're talking about a guy who has played in just 18 of a possible 34 games to start his 2-year career so far, which is absolutely brutal, right? He had a groin strain in the preseason in his rookie year, strained his groin again, then had an undisclosed injury last preseason, a foot sprain, re-aggravated the foot sprain into a Liz Frank injury, which is a pretty brutal injury to come back from. But we have some reports as well where, like, he's getting cortisone shots. Now, that's a big one. He's getting cortisone shots, which I think, look, I'm not a doctor, anybody that claims to really know what they're talking about. I think what has happened in this case, when we look at my boy Deepak Chona on Twitter, Sports Med Analytics, where he's a sports surgeon, graduated from, like, I don't know, something crazy like Stanford, and he uses, like, an algorithm to help with his injury stuff, and I find it pretty fascinating. He's saying that Rashod Bateman is going to be very likely ready for week 1. He said the hardware is out, which is positive news, which I think hardware is that maybe he had, like, a metal plate sort of supporting, or no, I think he had a screw sort of supporting the Liz Frank bridge in his foot or whatever. And when you get it removed, you have, like, a hole there, and there's probably, like, uncomfortable rubbing, or just, like, the uncomfortable, just removing a screw that was in your foot for months, right? So I think that's what the cortisone shots were, is just to, like, sort of help that, relieve that pain after you get the screw removed, which is a positive sign. But if removing the screw keeps aggravating him through the preseason, then that's, of course, an issue. So with all that being said, why am I still drafting him even with, the injury concerns, the cortisone shots? And I think that this is sort of what sums it up. First, I think it's priced in, right? He's an 8th round pick. This is a guy who last year, like, heading into year 2, was like a round 5 pick. So we're getting a discount there. The offense is better. The year 3 breakout is there. And it's also super early in the offseason, right? I don't want to wait this too much, the injury concern or the cortisone shots and everything. I'm down to buy him at cheap, because if training camp comes around, and he's fine, and there's no really reports of the cortisone shots or the lower body injury, then he probably shoots up like a 5th, 6th round pick, Rashod Bateman. So getting him now, you can kind of get some nice profit. But then if we get to August and it's like, hey, Rashod Bateman's still struggling, he's still having problems with his foot, then that's when we'll scale it back. But I think this early in the offseason, I'm fine being pretty overweight on Rashod Bateman. We also just saw Etienne, who had a similar Liz Frank injury, came back last year and was pretty much good to go. And again, any metal that was in his foot has been removed. So there's nothing still there. It's just a matter of healing the foot so we can be good to go for week 1. Now, after talking about the injury, why are we buying in? And it's because we're getting a year 3 breakout profile here at a massive discount, where we've seen, Chris Godwin, you've seen Calvin Ridley, Deebo Samuel, Deontay Johnson. It didn't really count last year with CD and Justin Jefferson because they were so expensive, but a lot of the time, like, the key to a fantasy football season has been, over the last, like, 5 years, has been finding that year 3 breakout. And I love Rashod Bateman for that reason, where this is a chart from Peter Howard, and it shows that if a wide receiver is going to break out, most of the time their first top 5 season or first top 12 season comes in year 3. So that's a reason to, buy into Rashod Bateman. And Rashod Bateman was an amazing prospect. I would put his prospect profile toe-to-toe. I mean, you're not going to put him toe-to-toe with, of course, like, your Jamar Chase or anything, but that next tier of, like, your CD Lambs, like, Rashod Bateman is right in that mix. Beautiful college profile, tested well, produced all 3 years, early declare, produced next to Tyler Johnson, another NFL wide receiver who was a year older than him. Just a really strong prospect. And then last year he showed a lot of promise on a per route basis, where he was again, it's a small sample. We're talking 120 routes last year, but he was 12th in yards per route run at 2.38. Anything above 2 yards per route run is a pretty solid number. And he was 18th in target per route run at 23.3%. Like, he was commanding more targets on a per route basis than, he was going, pretty close to, like, an A.J. Brown, more than a Jerry Jeudy, right on par with, guys like, I don't know, like Amari Cooper is in there too. 23.3% target per route run is nice. So he is efficient. He's earning routes on a per route, or he's earning targets on a per route basis. It's just a matter of, can he be healthy? And again, I think that's kind of priced in the 8th round. Like, again, like, with the injury risk, like, how much cheaper do you want it to be before you're interested? And I think that 8th round is probably the breaking point for me. Now, I love him in this offense, right? So again, elite prospect profile, strong per route numbers in year 2, and now heading into 2023, we have this new revamped Lamar Jackson offense, and they add in Odell Beckham, they add in Zay Flowers. Well, Rashod Bateman's the only guy outside of like Mark Andrews that's going to get meaningful routes in this wide receiver room that has an established rapport with Lamar Jackson. And Rashod Bateman was almost like misused last year too, where we're getting a new offensive coordinator now, but under Greg Roman, we saw Rashod Bateman, despite absolutely balling out in the first 2 weeks, his snap share stayed around 60% because Greg Roman loved to like rotate his wide receivers out. After in week 4 is when he got hurt, so I'm not really counting those. But that was another big issue too, is that like even though he did have great per route numbers, Roman refused to play him anymore. And like maybe in hindsight, that was an injury issue, but I really don't think so. Like through 3 weeks, there was no signs that he had any injury going on. Like he looked amazing. He looked explosive in those games. He looked really good. Greg Roman just wouldn't, increase his snaps. But now we have a changing of the guard. I've mentioned this a billion times, and I'll mention it a billion more. But Greg Roman is out, someone that would play a slow offense, low-volume pass offense with Todd Monken coming in, someone that is going to jack up the pass attempts, jack up the pace. There's going to be more plays, more pass attempts. The whole offense is going to be great. And if Lamar Jackson comes out here and, leads the league in passing touchdowns like he did in 2019 and has an MVP campaign in this new look offense from, actually being able to air it out, and then, you lighten up the boxes that way and you can sort of set up the run. But all the efficiency, the upside of this offense, if Lamar Jackson has a massive year, I think Rashod Bateman kind of comes with him. So we're getting a guy here that could be a huge win rate wide receiver on a new offense. I think he's the best value of all of the sort of like year 3 breakout candidates right now from that 2021 wide receiver class. But yeah, Bateman's a great value right now. I'm scooping him up because of the injury uncertainty. But again, if we get to August and things get a little bit more serious on the injury side, then sure, I'm down to scale it back. Now, we talked about Quentin Johnston, my favorite rookie wide receiver. Rookie wide receivers have been cheat codes in fantasy. Who is my second most drafted rookie wide receiver? And that is one, Marvin Mims. Now, he's going much later than the first two. He's going like, I don't even know what 163rd pick is. I think that's going to be like 13th round pick, Marvin Mims, wide receiver 73. And the reason why I love rookie wide receivers, if they have just been an absolute cheat code over the years, where we can see rookie wide receivers, they increase their points per game as the year goes on, whereas veterans go down. And if we take that a step forward, I made this chart of over the last 4 years, we have had on average 3 rookie wide receivers be top 24 point per game options from week 10 on. And you can see you're drafting these guys way later. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown was wide receiver 76, or wide receiver 78, and Marvin Mims is wide receiver 73. Like some of these guys are drafted in the wide receiver 70s. Like A.J. Brown was drafted in the 70s. Amon-Ra St. Brown was drafted in the 70s. You have a lot of guys that resemble this profile of Marvin Mims that absolutely outproduced where you drafted them down the stretch when it mattered the most, and you're playing in the fantasy playoffs and you're trying to win money. And that's what I think Marvin Mims can be as this like late season hammer. And he has a really nice upside profile. He has the perfect like better in best ball, better late in draft type of profile here. And the reason that I want to bet on Marvin Mims is because I think people are going to look at Mims and be like, well, Ron, he's like buried on this depth chart behind like Tim Patrick and Sutton and Judy. What I would say is that we have a new regime coming in, Sean Payton, who handpicked Marvin Mims, and Cortland Sutton's somebody who hasn't finished as a top 40 wide receiver in points per game or inside the top 40 wide receivers in points per game since 2019, and he's been tied to a bunch of trade rumors. You have Tim Patrick working back from an ACL. You have KJ Hamler working back from a bunch of his injuries. Outside of Judy, it's a pretty thin depth chart, and the beauty with Mims is his versatility. He's someone that can get on the field early because he can play inside and out. His year 1 and 3, he was about like a 30% slot percent guy, so, majority on the outside. And then year 2 was a 75% slot guy. So his like career numbers from slot and wide are like 50-50. He can play anywhere. He was also a good prospect, like early breakout. He produced. Here are his rookie comps in my database where you get some fun comps, right? You get like Deshaun Jackson, Brandon Cooks, you get KJ Hamler. Nelson Aguilar's not great. Diami Brown isn't great. He's by no means a lock to be this like amazing player, but we're getting him super cheap. Like wide receiver 73 is super cheap, and he has this profile that I think is a perfect fit for Russ as well. Like when you look at this list, you're looking at guys, of course, like Deshaun Jackson, Brandon Cooks are kind of like your luxury car version of this, but he is that build of, like speedy downfield playmaker, a little bit undersized of like Tyler Lockett with Russell Wilson, John Brown, T.Y. Hilton. He has that kind of profile as an undersized downfield speedster, which has had a lot of success with Russell Wilson. So you can kind of see what I'm getting at here. And Marvin Mims, like, I don't have data on this, but like for his entire career, he had a 16.7 yard ADOT and a 19.5 yard per reception. That has to be some of the highest marks for a college wide receiver with over like 100 catches. So he's a perfect fit for Russell Wilson, where he's making his money inside and out, down the field, kind of similar to a Tyler Lockett. And he's perfect for that better and best ball build, where if you're drafting on underdog, you can take him late. I love getting him as a bring back in those Chargers stacks. So if I go like Herbert, Quentin Johnston, I'm getting Mims on top, because we saw KJ Hamler was actually on the his rookie year, the Best Ball Mania winning team, and he put up like a 2 catches for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns game, and he actually brought Justin Herzig, the winner of the Best Ball Mania, or the first Best Ball Mania, through the first round of the playoffs. And I think that Mims can be something similar. Like, if he doesn't find himself as like an Amon-Ra St. Brown down the season or late in the season sort of like hammer, I think that he at least has the upside of, because of his ADOT and his yards per reception, that he can give you a stat line in best ball of like 2 catches for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, give you like 20 points, and win you a week on super low volume because of his, you know, his archetype. So yeah, I like betting on Mims here. I like betting on Denver as a bounce back team. This division breeds shootouts, right, where you have like Herbert and you have Mahomes, and you also have Sean Payton, who's a much better play caller and just overall coach than Nathaniel Hackett. I thought I could tough that out, but I couldn't. But regardless, Sean Payton, big upgrade from Nathaniel Hackett. And Russ over his entire career has been like a cornerstone of efficiency his entire career. You have to think that things bounce back to the mean. If you look at his game logs last year, down the stretch, Russell Wilson was actually a lot better than he was early on in the season. So we'll see what happens. I just think there's a lot of uncertainty with Russ and his bounce back, and then also betting on a rookie wide receiver profile. So Mims is somebody I've been taking a lot of in redraft. Now, that is going to do it for us today. Those are 3 wide receivers I cannot stop drafting on Underdog. Again, if you are new to the channel, if you are new to Underdog Fantasy, make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy, the best ball platform out there. You can draft teams right now. Don't have to worry about them. Don't have to worry about, you know, trades, waivers, any of that. You can just draft teams, get the reps in, you know, win money down the line, and not have to do any of the dirty work from week to week. Just make sure, if you are new, you use promo code RON. They'll match your deposit up to $100. The link will be in the description and in the comment section down below. But if you can't support there, or you already have a promo code signed up, a like, a subscribe, a comment goes a long way for the boy. As always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like